Howdy, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Texas SignalCast. I'm your host, Joe Desautels, and I'm here with my co-host, Jessica Montoya Coggins. Hello, Jessica.
Hey, Joe.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Normally we start this out and it's like, oh my goodness, there's like so much crap that has happened in just the past week. It's like, where do we even begin? I don't know. I don't really feel that much. I guess we have to like change what our standard is of what a lot is, because typically, as we say, like during a legislative session, by this time, nothing is happening. But this happens to be one of the craziest special sessions time periods we've ever had, certainly in my lifetime, and I've seen a few. But we had this little reprieve between the last crazy one where they passed the voter suppression bill and this one that starts on Monday where they're going to take over redistricting. And so in this little window of time, we still have a few things going on. We want to talk about them. So I think the perennial subject matter of Attorney General Ken Paxton, you have a little update for us on what's going on with that guy.
Sure. So Paxton has been pretty busy. He is suing more school districts, this time over the mask mandates. We talked about one school district who actually had a very cool way of circumventing that. Paris ISD, updated their dress code. Well, sadly, Paxton filed suit against them, and there is now a temporary restraining order against this. An attorney for Paris ISD, he basically said that Paxton's office didn't even notify them of this hearing until after it happened. So yes, and I want to again remind folks that right now hospitals are still, very much filled with COVID-19 patients. The chief pediatrician for Texas Children's Hospital, he was on CBS News. He said in Houston, there's record levels of children sick and hospitalized with COVID-19. So these are measures to protect children. But this is what Paxton has been busy doing. I know up in my area, he's also sued Fort Worth, Richardson. I'm sure Dallas is coming soon. So yes, that's what he's been busy in that regard. And also we just found out that he is busy in his own backyard. He's got a new Republican challenger for Attorney General. Have you heard about this?
Matt Krause, boy, when you mentioned that on our editorial call, it was hilarious to me because it's going to be so nice just to have him gone from the legislature. I hate to see these guys always fail upward, but the hope is enough of these people get in this race and they just all cannibalize themselves. That will be the hope. From what it seems like, Ken Paxton is still leading. He's still leading in the polls, as far as I can tell, and in fundraising, some of these other candidates just aren't really getting the traction. And from what I understand, that's what you think is probably why he probably jumped in here. Do you have any other information? Is that kind of your gut feeling? Or
I think that's kind of so Krau, we should mention, is a state representative from the Fort Worth area. He's very, very conservative, a member of the House Freedom Caucus. You can look at his Twitter feed; it'll make you vomit. But
it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. But he's been, talking about this announcement, and it sounds like his impetus was really the legal trouble that Paxton is in. For folks, that we always want to remind folks that 6 years ago he was indicted by a grand jury for felony securities fraud. That trial, there's been a whole sort of back and forth about where that case is going to be heard. Tentatively, it looks like it might be back in Collin County. But he's also under investigation by the FBI for a separate incident of abuse of office and bribery, and as it relates to his relationship with a wealthy donor. So this is the guy who it sounds like if even his close friends think he is in some legal trouble, I think he very much is.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Like you mentioned, this guy's from the Fort Worth area, which is North Texas, which is pretty much a neighbor to where Ken Paxton is from. And so this feels a little close to home to me, for Matt Krause to give up a safe seat in the House to take on this guy statewide tells me he probably knows something that we don't. And it's probably good news for us. And, he may just be rolling the dice and saying, you know what, something may hit the fan between now and May or March, whenever the primary is next year, and come down and sort of fatally injure Ken Paxton. But as you mentioned, he's been indicted for 6 years, which means the last time he was reelected, he was under indictment when he was reelected. So it'd be interesting to see. I don't think at that time he even had a strong Republican challenger, and now he's got what, four? So George P. Bush, a former Texas Supreme Court justice. Oh shoot, Ava Guzman, who's really by all everything that I can see is the only actually qualified person for this role. And so, I mean, I talked a little bit about her before. I watched her launch video, and you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell that she was a Republican at all, let alone, one of these like Freedom Caucus type people. So, it's just interesting to me that kind of, it's almost like that whole strain of the Republican Party, what we used to know as the Republican Party, just doesn't even exist anymore. And it's this new type, MAGA type, with Ken Paxton, who, suing locals like you're talking about, and suing other states to change the course of the election. That's what drives the Republican Party these days. And so, I love to see it. I want to see more of this cannibalization within the GOP. I'm still waiting for somebody to take on Sid Miller, but I guess he is just crazy enough and just unindicted enough to pass the sniff test for them. But
I guess so. Yes, but so we'll keep an eye on that. And I think this does, though, maybe ensure that there will be a runoff at least, which I think will be good for us. But yeah, we will see. So good luck.
yeah, and I know that Dan Patrick, Lieutenant Governor, I mean, man, I feel like he probably doesn't like it, but he's really kind of gotten away. We used to criticize Dan Patrick so much. I mean, really before Greg Abbott, sort of like the last half of 2020 and through the pandemic, he's just gotten so terrible that people are basically only talking about him. But before that, it was Dan Patrick. And it's really, he's kind of like sunk into the background in a lot of ways. And as bad as he is, and starting off on Fox the beginning of the pandemic saying things like, old people are willing to give up their lives for our freedom or whatever it was, he was one of the first people putting out these types of messages. And what we think of as like a trial balloon, like we'll go out there, say some really crazy stuff and see how it plays. It played very well, turns out, and everybody, as usual, kind of took the lead from Dan Patrick. I mean, he was a right-wing radio host before he was a state senator and lieutenant governor. So this is like what he's made for, right? The communications, the shock sort of narratives that he's trying to put out there, and in this environment that really works. Interestingly, he does have a challenger from the right. I don't know their name, but I do remember thinking, I've never heard of that person. They have zero chance to be relevant. He does have a Democratic challenger, which is Mike Collier, who's run previously. He just announced that he's raised over $1 million already this cycle. That's really good news. So we hope to continue to watch him. And there's even somebody else considering jumping in that race on the D side, but we've got to fill this out, and we haven't. There's still a gaping hole in our a lineup. So I don't know, with that governor position, we're starting to hear some rumors. I don't know if you've heard any rumors.
I've heard little rumblings. I was in Washington, D.C. a few days ago, and I talked with some folks that seemed pretty confident that we're getting someone big down here. So
big heavy hitter.
Yeah, so I think early October is about where we are. So just hang tight for a few more weeks, folks.
Yeah, we'll all be saying a 4-letter word, but it's interesting because I'm starting to hear the same thing and seeing it on social media that people are talking about a potential announcement from someone that we've highly anticipated hearing from, and everybody's just waiting on pins and needles. So we'll see. We got a couple weeks. Obviously, you'll be hearing about it here first if there is an announcement. Half the time on this stuff, and it sounds like you're maybe in the same position of like, you don't really know what's out there and what's not out there. I mean, you talk to a lot of people, and so I talk to people sometimes. this is in confidence, and other times you're like, oh, am I not supposed to talk about that? And so, you got to be careful what you say. So I tend to like to see things on Twitter first to kind of give myself some cover if I've don't want to sort of blow the cover on somebody's announcement.
It
But
reminds me of like the contracts that those Marvel actors sign where they can't really say anything, but Tom Holland, who plays Spider-Man, he has a tendency to let things slip a lot of the time. So
yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, or what I always think about are like the Bachelor and Bachelorette like
yeah.
contestants, and they already know what happened, and like they're just seeing themselves just be eviscerated on national TV, and they can't even defend themselves yet because we have to wait till next week to see what happens. And so
Joe, I did not take you for a bachelor or bachelorette fan. I have to be honest.
that's hilarious. Well, my wife watches it, so I totally get into it. And now we're watching Bachelor in Paradise now. But yeah, I was actually
yeah, I've been watching that one too.
yeah. So yeah, that's great. I actually made a bracket the last couple of years for Bachelor. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, I can get it. I can get into it. I can roll with it. But we'll see. We'll see who gets the rose from the Democratic Party to challenge Greg Abbott next year. Um, we're all just waiting any day now. Certainly the sooner it happens, the sooner folks can get organizing and raising money, and that's going to be what's key. Registering voters and getting them to turn out. And so the earlier we can do that, the better. And there seems to be quite a few things, like we mentioned, redistricting happening that will give us an opportunity to have something to really talk about, And so that's what we look forward to.
I think there's a lot to talk about.
Mhm.
Texas has certainly been in the news. When I was in DC, people were asking like they were looking at me like I was like some trauma victim or something. Like, how are you doing?
Texas drama. I mean, it's a thing.
You have to explain. But everything from permitless carry to this voter suppression bill, the COVID, the way that the state has been dealing with COVID-19, the extreme anti-abortion bill. These are all things that have generated immense headlines and made people very wary of Texas. I know we were chatting earlier. I think this actually helped Gavin Newsom really survive his recall in California, not just survive, but just stomp it to bits and pieces.
He basically got a new mandate, which is incredible because we went from thinking, oh, he's going to lose his job to winning by more than he won the first time around. Like he won, I mean, 260 something percent of the vote is no joke, no matter who you're running against. I mean, Greg Abbott didn't win Texas with that. So that's really incredible. And he claimed the mandate. When they asked voters, why did you vote to not recall the governor? They cited his vaccination policies and his mask mandates and the COVID numbers for California compared to Florida and where? Texas. Yes. And so I love how you put it. Basically, Greg Abbott made a basically like an in-kind contribution to his campaign. And from what I hear, one of the slogans that he used was "Don't Texas my California," which is great. I mean, just to watch these guys throw this back in his face it feels pretty good. Yeah. So as you mentioned, all the different things that came up in his speech, man, he was really feeling it. I don't know if you watched his victory speech, but he was really feeling. I think he kind of went off the script a little bit, but he went basically down the list: the women's rights and the climate and just like everything. Just when you voted no to recall me, you voted yes to do all these things, and he just listed these mandate for progressive policies. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that he is now a clear presidential contender based on that. I mean, the Republicans really showed their own butts in this case. They spent $300 million to just get obliterated in this election.
Yeah, it was a lot of money for I guess a bill from the French Laundry, basically.
Oh yeah, man, that's great. Yeah, and it wasn't like an election that was already gonna happen and they just spent a bunch of money on it. They literally created it out of thin air in the giant dumpster fire and then just burned all their money in it. And if they have that much money to burn, that's really incredible. The sad thing is obviously it also burned a lot of public money, and there was a lot, just to hold these elections. I saw somebody say, I thought it was great, that when loser pays was a thing in Texas, where basically, like, if you file a lawsuit against a doctor or something for malpractice or whatever, that if you lose the lawsuit, that you have to pay for all the attorney's fees and things like that. So that was just another way to hurt Texans and take away their right to the courtroom and justice. And in this case, I think it works perfectly to say, like, yeah, you called this recall, you were very confident, you lost, it cost the state a whole bunch of money, and now you have to pay that bill. Well, there has been some news though on the SB 8. There's been a little bit of update on that. Do you have any information on the latest on the Texas abortion ban?
Sure. So there is a hearing set for October 1st. As some of y'all might have we discussed, the Department of Justice has filed a lawsuit against this bill. There's also an amicus brief that was filed by several attorneys generals in support of that. It was actually funny for an article a few weeks ago. I was able to speak with the Attorney General of Massachusetts about this lawsuit and sort of what SB 8 means. And it was, first off, just nice to talk with an attorney general who wasn't under indictment. So I got to experience that. But this amicus brief really highlights how much this bill is so scary. The attorneys generals from around the country, they point out that this sort of jeopardizes really anyone who steps into Texas. Would somebody who works for a Planned Parenthood in New Mexico, could they just be sued if they're, visiting relatives in Houston, things like that? We've also mentioned a number of corporations have started to get involved in this. Both Uber and Lyft created legal defense funds, if any of their drivers are impacted by this. Two large dating sites that are based in Texas, Match, they started a fund. The CEO of Bumble sort of did the same thing on her personal account. And then we have a large company, Salesforce, that they sent a letter to their employees saying, if you do not feel comfortable in Texas, we'll relocate you. So this is starting to, I think, have some impact. We know also in California, that was a major driver for a lot of people voting no against that recall, was this extreme anti-abortion bill being in the news so much. And it's a very frightening bill. And it creates this legal minefield that we've never really experienced before. The phrase abortion bounties.
Yeah.
That keeps coming up. I heard it from people when I was traveling. Like, it was just, they know about this bill, and it scares them to bits.
Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting because this is so unpopular that they keep pushing it. I mean, normally they're so good at messaging it just makes me sick. But in this particular case, it's like they just keep doubling down on something that's unpopular. And I know with their base it's popular, but like what I'm seeing out there is the people who you would think this would be a victory for them, they're not even really celebrating it. They don't think it went far enough. And I'm like, and the time that Greg Abbott got called out by the media on this, and he basically said, oh, well, rape victims can get an abortion for up to 6 weeks, which he was clearly not ready for that question for some reason, but he stumbled over it. It didn't look good or sound good from anybody's perspective, but he got torn to shreds over that. And because people just were like appalled that he would suggest that even rape victims would have access to abortion. And
actually, there was also an announcement. This just happened before we started recording, but I don't know if you remember this woman, Jenna Ellis. She was very much omnipresent. Yeah. She's actually endorsed Don Huffines. Don Huffines, one of Abbott's primary challengers, a former state senator, and I know him from his car dealerships up here in North Texas. But yeah, he took Abbott to task, basically saying, "Oh, you've opened the door for this limited window of abortions. How dare you? There should be no abortions. Life begins at conception." And so, yeah, Jenna Ellis endorsed endorse tough
Yeah, and she called Abbott a rhino for for his comments and for this bill. It's amazing, like, and they keep trying to satiate these people. And there's an account my wife shared with me, which is called I guess Abolish Abortion is the name of the organization, Abolish Abortion Texas. And it would like the stuff that they have on here. I would say you probably need a trigger warning to read, but like it's really just like it was one of those things where like I had to read 4 or 5 different posts to see if it was a parody or not, right? Like, um, and I think it's absolutely real, and that's how these people, that's how they think and what they believe. And they weren't just attacking Abbott for his position; they were attacking Alan West, who is to the right of Abbott, who has been criticizing Abbott over the. So it's just like it's like there's no end. There is no end. There's no point at which you can satiate these people. And I don't know why Abbott isn't politically astute enough to see that he's burning all his political capital for people that will never be satisfied.
Well, you know who is astute is Ron DeSantis out in Florida, who, when he was asked, would you support a bill like Senate Bill 8, he backed away from it, saying, I don't think we're going to do this in Florida. Now you have some people, I
Whoa.
think, in their state legislature who do want to see this. But I think
Sure.
even if Ron DeSantis realizes, hey, I'm not, I kind of maybe am stepping away from this mess, that should tell you something.
Yeah, Mr. COVID himself. I mean, that's saying a lot, I think. I mean, he's somewhat in that phrasing, maybe acknowledging that his state's a little bit purpler than Texas is, a little bit bluer. And the way Texas is shifting and the way Florida has gone the last few elections, I think we're getting pretty close to sort of that, coin flip, um, that place. And so I don't think he wants to see it, Florida, move back that direction. And he clearly knows that that's not a popular decision. And as we've mentioned before, almost everything Abbott has done has been to almost catch up with DeSantis because he was so far ahead and being lauded by the far right and basically seen as almost the clear shoe-in for the Republican primary, assuming another Florida resident, Donald Trump, does not decide to run again. So very interesting stuff from coast to coast, California to Florida. Everybody's looking at Texas and basically saying, nah. So
We'll take a pass.
yeah, exactly. And so, the big thing that's going to happen this weekend, there's a hearing for redistricting, folks. This is really important. These same people who try to take away your right to vote are going to start drawing the lines for themselves. So this is when they get to pick the voters instead of you getting to pick your representative. And supposedly on Saturday, the Senate maps are going to drop. And so we know that even as we do elect more Democrats in the Senate, Dan Patrick changes the rules in the Senate to allow less and less of a majority to put the legislation on the floor. So even as we make gains, hard-fought gains through gerrymandered districts, then they can still go back when it's time to legislate and change the rules and make it even harder for our voices to be heard. So that's just how important redistricting is. And we know that we had, I think it was 11,000 something votes that separated a Democratic majority from the Republican majority in the House across, those 11 different districts. Just if 11,000 votes in the right districts would have went a different way, we would have different representation and a lot. None of this stuff really would have happened that we're talking about, right? Because the Democratic speaker would have never let SB 8 come up to the floor. So that's how important this stuff is. And in the last chance to be heard on redistricting is this Saturday. And so they're going to be some debates and things from the legislators, but that shouldn't stop you also from calling your legislator and demanding fair maps. And one of the organizations leading that cause is All on the Line. That is sort of the campaign arm-ish of the national redistricting organization led by our former Attorney General Eric Holder, and also on that board is former President Barack Obama, because he knew that if when I leave office, I have to have some legacy, and he found his legacy to be voting rights, and knew that redistricting was going to be coming up in a couple of years, and we had to be ready for this fight. So
Yeah, we will see. I know that the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is also getting some hearings up in the Capitol Hill. So if anyone knows Joe Manchin out there, now's the time to
that's
go
a
to his
really, yeah.
House vote and let him know how you feel.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's really needs to be talked about. That the Democrats who left and went to DC, the effects of their visit is still being felt in DC, because the Senate is now talking about that they struck a deal with Joe Manchin to pass sort of a watered down version of voting rights legislation. Now it's my understanding that we probably still need to break the filibuster in order to get a vote on that, unfortunately. And so I think now that we've got a bill that we're interested in, we can get past the Senate and we know can pass the House, I think we still have to lean on Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema to get rid of the filibuster to at least pass this one bill.
Yeah, no, but I mean, yeah, you are exactly right that we are seeing the the ramifications of what our Texas lawmakers did, and the impact that they had. This bill is again not perfect, but it's still, it establishes a national holiday. It has easier access for voter ID, voter IDs, where things like a college identification would work, or other things.
I love that, by the way. I love it. I loved when we take the narrative away from the Republicans, because now we're going to have Republicans adamantly against a national voter ID, right? And they're just gonna be like, "Oh no, we can't do that. A national ID that says you're an American, like what? And you have the right to vote? Oh my God!" Like I love it. I love it, because they beat us over the head with this voter ID stuff so much, and it's just we take the bait in the way we talk about it, and we've got to be smarter about framing it. And so when I saw that was included, and I also heard that a bunch of Democrats were against including it, and I get why, but it's too important and it's too big, and I think that it's a chance to
we just got to remove barriers on
we just say
too.
what it is. It didn't have to be onerous. It's just because if we say that this ID works, that ID works, that's being proactive, that's being inclusive. And then we could also say, here's a pot of money for people who don't have access to go get that ID, or so that we make sure that it doesn't cost people money to exercise their right to vote, because that is what we're seeing in Texas. And so anyway, yeah.
Also championed by a lot of disability rights advocates too, for folks who do not want to get a driver's license, but they would like to have that ID. If you do know Joe Manchin, give him a visit.
Well, that's it, folks. Quite a bit out there. I mean, I think the key takeaway here is redistricting is happening now. That session is going to start on Monday, and so there'll be hearings. But take time to pay attention to what's going on there. It's as important as the voting rights bill that basically took up our entire summer, and we're still talking about it. So that's what's key. So please pay attention there. And of course, you'll hear about it first at texassignal.com. And so, keep checking in with us for the latest coverage. And also find us, on this podcast and all social media channels, essentially Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. We're all over it. And so, in fact, actually, just yesterday I did a special episode with Austin Mayor Pro Tem Natasha Harper Madison about I-35 potential expansion, and how it's historically segregated our city. So we like to have those types of in-depth conversations, as well as just hitting the top of the headlines. But just stay tuned with us for that coverage, and we appreciate that. You can go to texassignal.com and become a Patreon member and support this type of progressive journalism. And we certainly appreciate it when you do. That's all I got.
Same here.
Okay, y'all. Till next time. Later.
Bye, guys.